Thank you all. Thank you all for being here this evening. It's really, really a pleasure to be here and celebrate this incredible moment. We have been talking about this for a very long time, and it has taken all of the P's and more P's to come. And thank you, Suzanne, for your incredible and constant leadership. It's been extraordinary for us to be your thought partner in pulling this garden off. I also want to reiterate the work of Charlotte Barrows, Mark Streeter, Aaron Percival in our office, and Matthew Seibert, who was also part of this team. It has spanned kind of a generation in our office, actually. So I'm going to walk you through this process, but I want to introduce it by telling you just a tiny bit about ourselves and how this project fits into our values as a practice. We firmly believe that the soil we stand on, the soil we occupy, it's full. Whenever I hear someone say, oh, there's empty space, open space, the site is tabula rasa, there's nothing there, it's just not true. There's always something there. Whether it's the geologic history of the retreat of the glacial ice sheet, whether it's the first Native American occupation of this continent, whether it's the colonial settlements and arrivals, the beginning of industry, the enslavement of other humans, there are stories, beautiful and hideous, in the land beneath our feet. And it becomes our moral duty to excavate and reveal those stories as we find them. We live in an extraordinary time where we get to tell the truth, and it feels good. It feels good, and it's hard work because everyone's not ready. And so places like this site are leading the way in a new kind of preservation. I wanted to just mention a couple of the projects on the books. One is the Hagley Crown and Shield Garden in Wilmington, Delaware. And that's an interesting one where it was actually sort of closed off to the public and not maintained because it didn't fit within the singular mission of Hagley, which was the Museum of American Industry. And what we're finding is that right now, the public is quite happy to hear multiple complex and layered narratives because I think more than maybe 50 years ago, we realize how complicated the world is and that there isn't a singular narrative. So we're hopeful to begin the restoration of this garden soon. This is a very big week for the Jay Heritage Site, but also for MBW. Friday night, I'll be with the descendants of the enslaved people of Monticello to reconsecrate the burial ground at Monticello that our firm has designed the restoration of. And then the next morning on Saturday, we have the public ceremony of opening the burial ground once again to the public. So it's a very exciting moment. And then there are other places like Filoli. This is one of the National Trust properties that we've been working on. And there again, expanding the narratives beyond a mansion and its formal garden to start to talk about the Native American occupation of the peninsula of below, just south of San Francisco, the water history of San Francisco. It all began at Filoli, and these narratives almost don't exist. In the center of the screen is one of my favorite long-term projects, Olana, working also with the state parks of New York on restoring Frederick Church's, as he wrote, his most magnificent painting. He considered that his greatest work of art, the landscape that he designed and built at Olana. I want to also mention that in the audience is Victoria Johnson, who's currently writing a biography of Frederick Church. And it's been exciting to have a great scholar digging in even more deeply to bring Church to the public. So these projects start as restoring something or as a typical landscape project, but then they start to open up all kinds of different worlds. So I want to walk you through the process for this garden. I've listed the landscape committee that Suzanne just ran us through, but also the folks at New York State Parks, the Division for Historic Preservation, and the Westchester County Parks Department. Everyone's voice was essential to getting this project to happen. You're seeing the rendering of the gardens. It took a while to get here. We had to figure out what are the appropriate narratives of each garden. So let me walk you through that, but also I want to cite us within Long Island Sound, or the Devil's Belt. How do you like that on that map? Can you see it? Just below the Sound, and then it says called also the Devil's Belt. And the blue circle is where we are. And you have to also imagine the sweeping view from the mansion all the way to the Sound. So you would have had this big open view of water. So the first images that we were studying from 1745 to 1822 were really a testament to the length of time that the Jay family was farming. This was an agricultural site. These images show you the big open fields, gardens. You can see in the upper left one the beginnings of this long linear garden, and you can see the traces of the ha-ha wall that was begun by Peter Augustus Jay under the direction of his father, John Jay. And then at the bottom, you're seeing the ha-ha wall in the state it was when we began this project. Moving a little later, from 1823 all the way to the 1904 era, we called this era the country estate era. It's moving from agricultural production to more of a pleasure garden. You're seeing the appearance of the A.J. Davis Pavilion that was built in 1849 on Cherry Hill, that was right behind you on this tent. It was the gardening shed. But it was placed axially on this high point, and you can start to see in this map this long processional axis and the garden beds. So because we weren't restoring to any single period, we're mining all this research, maps, letters, recollections, and then later photographs for what will be the kit of parts for this new garden. But this kit of parts doesn't land from outer space. It actually grows from a research process. So room 1, we're calling the parterre garden. You're seeing these photographs of it in its heyday with the box edging, more formalized plantings. Again, this is a pleasure estate under the Van Noorden family from 1904 to 1910, and then the Palmer family from 1911 to 1935. There was subsequently a division of the garden rooms. We don't know exactly when, but we think it was during the Palmer family ownership. They were certainly there by 1918, I believe. So here you're seeing on this map the gardens divided into these specific garden rooms. So this was the bones. These were the bones into which we would weave a new and contemporary horticultural story based on the programming of the Jay Heritage Center that Suzanne just walked us through. Also, under the Devereaux family ownership in 1947, a swimming pool was constructed in what we call Garden 2. By 1927, the path that was a central axis had already been diverted in the second garden room to be a perimeter path around a large green, and then by 1947, the swimming pool was built. You can see it there in the bottom left with its awesome bright blue. We decided maybe that wasn't super awesome for the future. So, but you can see it also, it's built on a slope. So it has this flush condition on the upper end, and then it's out of the ground on the lower end, and as it is today. In order to meet code and regulations, any body of water more than 2 feet deep triggers pool code. So self-closing doors, high gates, fences, all that sort of thing. So by keeping the shape, the size, and the form, but filling it up to where it's only 2 feet deep, it qualifies as a fountain. So it's now a reflecting pool. But the spatial construct of it will feel very familiar to the historic eye. Room 3, the arbor room, we had enough documentation that we could actually do a recreation of the arbor. So the detailing of the arbor came directly from magnifying glasses on these photographs. And miraculously, just in the year since it's been planted, the roses are already having a real robust showing. So this sort of cheat sheet helps us decipher the walls. You see the long yellow Ha-Ha wall that was the first wall built, 1822, and that was the Peter Augustus J wall that I was mentioning earlier. And then you can see the 1917 cross walls that divide the garden into 3 different garden rooms. So let's take a quick tour via slide, and then we'll fill your glasses and we'll take you in person through the garden. So the first garden, the parterre garden, this is a mixed garden because of because of the agricultural heritage of the site. This is meant to be a mix of a pleasure garden with the very formal parterres that we have photographic evidence of their shape, their dimension, their size. So we were able to do the very formal sort of entrance threshold, acknowledging that era. But within the same garden, the second half of it is a productive garden of vegetables. We intentionally, because of the archaeological record that we deeply respect, and we did not do extensive archaeology to exhume the entire garden to see what remains of perhaps Native American or African American or colonial settlement there might be, we've built, you'll see, above the ground. So we've lifted in raised beds, and it's just a caution to you, back to that first statement, the land is full. Whatever you're working on in your personal lives, station identification, whatever you're working on, and you say, oh, we have this empty site right here, we'll just put whatever. Before you slam something down on this earth, please call an archaeologist or somebody to look at that ground. And one of the real old school tricks before we had these fabulous LiDAR surveys is to park a few cars at night and shine them across the site, and you will see miracles. You will see footprints of buildings, you'll see traces of old roads. So just taking your site becomes more compelling and exciting when you learn these historic traces that are inside, when you learn the land's story. So just have to say that. So out of respect for the archaeological record, we built on top of the ground. This was the site at the beginning. Some of you may remember the state of things. These are quite funny. The very tall, skinny spruce so often will go to historic sites, and you'll see, hemlocks planted 3 feet apart, and they're 50 feet tall. And people are like, what do we do with them? And I'm like, well, they were a hedge that someone neglected. So chances are this was a hedge that, hedge gone wild, we call it. And this, of course, is what we've been able, with this incredible army of collaborators and participants, to bring into being. So what you're seeing is that parterre garden as the threshold, then an open space for small gatherings, for classes, as Suzanne said, a didactic landscape, a place of teaching and learning. And then you're seeing the raised bed vegetables. These photographs were from October, so you're seeing it in its more red, russet, brown, and gold phase. Today you're going to see it in its pink, lavender, and blue phase. So we want it to be exciting and interesting in all seasons. But for a newly planted garden in October, thank goodness for that miraculous sky. It was fairly photogenic. And so here you are with the golds, the reds, and the russety seed heads of grasses. The walls were not restored as part of this scope. Our scope really was a horticultural scope, cultural landscape report, history, care with what we put back in horticulturally, but there were not the funds to restore all of the walls. So they still need some love. But here is that didactic landscape at work, the vegetable gardens in production, and then, of course, in winter, just stunning. You see the bones of the garden are revealed in the starkness of winter. I absolutely love gardens in winter. It's my favorite time to visit a beautiful garden. And then the plant palettes, we've posted signs with all of the plants per garden so that you can look at the plants that are blooming. There are many, many labels. There are no peonies, even though there are lots of peony labels. Peonies aren't there yet, but they will be. So just trying to trick you. And then, so now let's move to the reflecting pool. This central garden, it has one remaining historic tree, the Japanese maple, and this was the state of things when we arrived. This is like the best before and after possible, because there you have it now. I think it's really it's an unusual. I love the sloping ground around this pool with its embedded end and its lifted end, and the beautiful Japanese maple, and then Hallelujah Sky right there with its benediction. And this is looking back up the long axis. And remember, I said in 1927 the axis was broken with the perimeter path, and then later the pool in 49. These are students from Columbia University Preservation Program that came to visit the garden. So already it's working as this place of learning. And I hope, and I think Suzanne's dream also, is that perhaps this could set a standard for the respectful treatment of a contemporary landscape in a historic context. Again, the plant palette really trying to hit 4 seasons of interest, color, these big pulses of blooms. And then the last garden is the arbor garden. Here you can see the very sad state of things, early days. And the photograph that I referenced earlier with the completed construction of the arbor below. So a very accurate, in the Department of the Interior standards, if you have a lot of information like drawings or accurate photographs, you can do a reconstruction as opposed to, we didn't have the remains to do a restoration. So this was a great opportunity to actually put back something with the details that we knew from the photographs. And there it is, but much better today, much more filled out even. And this wonderful structure receiving the final spine. The idea of this garden was also to show these beds. There had been, like storm windows for starting plants. Cold frames. There have been cold frames in this garden. And so we thought, well, what about a series of rectangular beds? We don't want to just make too much of a horticultural obligation of maintenance. So we did these rectangular bands that some of which are grass for now, but all of which could be planted later on. But this garden is cultivating beautiful companion plants that love each other. They occur naturally together. So one might come to that garden and say, I want to have native plants. I want to have native plants that thrive in and around rye, and what looks great together. So it really is almost a box of beautiful native watercolors that you can go and think about where you might live and lessons that you can take from this garden. So this is part of the positive radiating influence of the Jay Heritage site in this didactic lens. It's also a bridge to the meadow. So imagine meadow plants at night hopping the deer fence, crawling down into the garden, and putting their roots down in these beds. It really is almost the formalization of those plants into these drifts from which you can see over the ha-ha wall to the beautiful meadow that Larry Weiner and Associates, landscape architects, have done for this incredible project. So now back at the very entrance of the garden, when you go over the steps, you will be greeted by this fanfare of flowers. I wanted to end on this slide just with a nod to the fact that gardens are ongoing, they're ever evolving, they're ever changing. They are not static constructs. They're just like us. They're born, they die, they pass on what they know to others, they pass on the seed bank, and they require tremendous stewardship. So everyone under this, I'm going to say canvas, has shared in the making of this garden. And it has been a tremendous honor for MBW to be part of this experience. The walls, as I mentioned, need love. They need help. There are many projects ahead, so we can toast our achievement and toast to the future stewards of this beautiful, wonderful place. Thank you so much.